Hi, this is Chris Converse, and in this episode, we'll explore some CSS techniques for styling text and links in a footer for multiple screen sizes without the need for a lot of extra HTML on our web page. Our footer content is divided into two div elements, and we'll use these two divs to style all of the footer content. So if you'd like to follow along with me, download the exercise files, and let's begin by opening index.html in a text editor. And once you have the HTML file open, up in the head area, you'll see we have a link to style.css, which we'll be opening in a few minutes. If I scroll down inside of the body area, we have a header, an article element, and a footer element. Inside the footer, we have two divs. There's the first div here, which contains the copyright information. There's also a link around the company name, and two additional links, and a break tag. And in the second div, we just simply have 4 anchor links. So I want to call attention to the fact that we do have a break tag here, which we're going to be turning off for larger screens. And it's these two div elements we're going to be targeting in our CSS in order to style multiple layouts of the footer. Now, if you'd like to see the layout we're going to be starting with, you can open index.html in a browser. Inside of our browser, we can see the footer showing up down here at the bottom. Now there's no formatting in place, so we don't have any spaces between our links, and we can see the break tag pushing the privacy policy and legal statement on the next line. And so to begin styling our content, let's go back to the exercise files and let's open style.css in our text editor. And now inside of our CSS file, let's scroll down and let's find the rule that targets all of the anchor tags inside of the footer. After text decoration none, let's come in here and add a property. Let's set a margin of 0 pixels on the top, then a space, 16 pixels on the right, then a space, 0 on the bottom, and 0 on the left. At our semicolon, I'll save my file, reload in the browser. We'll now see that all of the anchor links have a 16 pixel margin on the right. However, the link for the company has a 16 pixel margin on the right, and we have a period here. So we're going to fix that in a moment. Back in our CSS, after the hover, let's hit a few returns, and let's set the break tag so that it does not display, so that privacy policy and legal statement will be on the same line as the copyright. So we'll type footer space BR for the break tag, put in our brackets. Let's come in here and set display to none. Save our work, go back to the browser. We can see that these two links are now showing up on the first line. Let's go back to our CSS, and now let's target the anchor links in the first div element. We want to add some margin properties to the left-hand side of the anchor links. So we'll start with footer, then a space, then we'll use a greater than sign, then type in div. We want to target the divs that are immediately inside of the footer element. Then we're going to use the nth child selector. So we'll type a colon, nth dash child, put in our parentheses, and then inside of the parentheses, we'll put a number 1 to target the first div element that's immediately inside of the footer. Then outside of the parentheses, let's hit a space, type the letter A. So we're targeting all of the anchor links in the first div element. Put in our brackets, let's split this open, and let's add a property of margin. And we'll set the values to 0 on the top, space, 0 on the right, space, 0 on the bottom, and 12 pixels on the left. With that in place, we'll hit save. And now back in the browser, all of the links in the first div have a margin left property of 12 pixels. And now we'll go back to our CSS file and we'll override the very first anchor link so that the company name doesn't have a margin left, but the privacy policy and legal statement will still have the margin settings. So back in our CSS, let's create a new rule. Target footer, greater than, div, colon, nth child, put in our parentheses, put a number 1 inside, then a space, then we'll type a colon nth child, put in our parentheses, we'll put a number 1 inside of here as well. So we're targeting the first anchor link in the first div, then a space, put in our brackets. I'll split these open, and the first property is going to be margin. We're going to set this to 0 on all 4 sides. And then on the next line, let's come in here and set a float property to none. Now we're not using floats at the moment, but when we get to smaller screens, we are going to invoke a float property, and we want to make sure the company name doesn't pick up that property as well. So now with that in place, let's save our work. Let's go back to the browser and hit reload. And we'll now see that the anchor link around the company name has no extra margin on the right or left, but privacy policy and legal statement have margin on the left, which is a little different from the links in the second div, which have the margin on the right-hand side. And now the last property I want to set for the larger screens is to make the second div spaced out a little further from the first div. So back to our CSS, we'll type footer greater than div colon nth child. Put in our parentheses. Inside of the parentheses, we'll put a number 2. We're going to target the second div element, which holds the links for About Us, Products, Services, and Contact Us. Put in our brackets. We'll split this open. And we'll come in here and set a margin property. We're going to set 14 pixels on the top, 0 on the right, 0 on the bottom, and 0 on the left. Save our work, and we'll now see that these 4 links are now spacing 14 additional pixels away from the first div. So now with these in place, let's scroll down and let's make some changes for when our browser is under 700 pixels. So the first thing I'll do is come in here and change the width of my browser so that we are under 700 pixels. So here we're at about 650. If you scroll down in the CSS, I've already put a media query in here with a max width of 700. And now the first thing I'm going to do in this media query is turn the break tag back on, just in case the legal statement or privacy policy begin to wrap for the smaller screen. So inside the media query, we're going to type footer space br, put in our brackets. We're going to set a display type of inline. With that in place, we'll hit save. We'll now see that privacy policy and legal statement now wrap to the next line. Now we'll need to get rid of that extra margin on the left-hand side. So again, still inside of the media query for a max width of 700. Let's now target the anchor tags inside of the first div. So footer space greater than div colon nth child. Put in our parentheses, put a number 1, then a space, then an A, targeting the anchor tag. Put in our brackets. Inside here, the first property we're going to set is going to be the display type. We're going to set the display to inline block. This way we can assign margin properties to the top and bottom. Otherwise, an anchor tag, which has a display type of inline, will not allow us to assign margins to the top and bottom. So after display, let's hit a return. We'll type margin. We're going to put 16 pixels on the top, space, 12 pixels on the right, 0 on the bottom, and 0 on the left. Save our work, go back to the browser. Now we can see privacy policy and legal statement are spaced a little further away from the first line of the copyright, and the margin left property has been removed as well. So at this point, let's make some more adjustments for when the browser is less than 500 pixels wide. So the first thing I'll do is adjust my preview here so that we're at about 470. Let's come over to the CSS. I'll scroll down here a little bit. I have a media query in here with a maximum width of 500. And inside of here, let's start by targeting all of the anchor tags in the footer. So footer greater than div space A. Put in our brackets. Inside of here, let's set a float property. Let's set the value to left. And then to make sure each item shows up on its own line, let's set a clear property of left as well. And then next, let's set a margin property. Let's set that to 16 pixels on the top, 0 on the right, 0 on the bottom, and 0 on the left. Now, since all of our anchor links now have float properties, we're going to need to clear the floats on the main div elements. So for the next rule, we're going to type footer greater than div, 2 colons. Let's put in a pseudo element of after, then a space. Put in our brackets. Let's hit a few returns. Let's put in content. Next, 2 single tick marks and a semicolon. So we're setting the content to nothing. Let's set a display type of block. And lastly, let's set a clear property of both. And then finally, let's add one more rule to target the second div element. So we'll type footer greater than div colon nth child. Put in our parentheses, number 2, space, let's put in our brackets. Let me scroll up here a little bit. Now what we want to do for the second div is add a rule across the top and then space this out a little bit further. So first let's start with the spacing. So we'll do that by adding a margin property. We'll add 24 pixels to the top, 0 on the right, 0 on the bottom, and 0 on the left. Next property is padding. We're going to set 10 pixels on the top, 0 on the right, 0 on the bottom, and 0 on the left. And then finally, we'll add a border to the top. So border dash top, colon space, 1 pixel for the size, solid for the style, then a space, and then for the color, we'll use the RGBA color space. So RGBA, parentheses, semicolon. Inside of the parentheses, for red, we're going to set 95, comma, 87 for green, comma, 75 for blue, then a comma, and then we'll set 0.3 for the alpha setting. So now with these in place, save your work, go back to the browser, hit reload, and now when the browser's width is under 500 pixels, we'll see all of the links will stack up vertically. We'll see the rule being applied to the second div in the footer element, and then if we come back and increase the width of the browser, we can see the different footer layouts that we've created with our CSS. So with minimal structure in our HTML file, we were able to modify our footer layout for multiple screen sizes using only CSS. Now, if you'd like to learn to build a full web page using HTML and CSS that's responsive across screen sizes as well as the printed page, check out Creating a Responsive Web Design, which is also available here in the library. And with that, I'll conclude this episode, and as always, thanks for watching.